In my 10 minutes, I thought I'll cover three different segments in this topic. One is, obviously, if you're saying enabling agriculture, something is disabled it. What is the proof of disablement and why the disablement has occurred, as one segment. Moving on to what are the e-based solutions that can actually deal with those disablements, and several of them already part of the e-Chopal initiative, and a couple of them are on the drawing board at this time. And finally, also share the third segment for E to really deliver the results. A lot of non-E has to happen along with it. And based on our own experience, what are some of those non-E's as my third segment. What more proof does one require other than some of the paradoxes of Indian agriculture to say that something is disabled? All of us are very familiar with the legendary hard work of farmers, yet the productivity is still very low. We have large arable land, and therefore we are among the largest producers of several crops, yet very insignificant part of that is processed. We also have very diverse agroclimatic zones, and literally we can produce anything that is produced anywhere in the world, but the consumers have very limited choice when you come to the food and related products. And Dr. Mani already talked about that we have the largest workforce in India employed in agriculture. Yet, if one were to look at why this disablement has happened, as the core reason, one, of course, agriculture itself is an enterprise of uncertainty. Whether it is exposure to weather variability or whether it is exposure to pest incidents and attacks. I think one of the issues in India, as in many other emerging economies, is that several institutions that will deal with some of these uncertainties in managing this risk, transferring this risk to marketplace, are still emerging. As a result, the farmer and rest of the value chain has to find other means of dealing with these uncertainties. And obviously, when you look at farmer, some of the basic characteristics we are all familiar with. One, of course, is that farmers in these economies are relatively small. The average land holding in India is less than 1.5 hectares. They are all very dispersed, and the over 120 million farmers that we have in India are dispersed across 600,000 villages, and that dispersion has implications. And the third factor is that there is a fair amount of heterogeneity. The conditions of each farmer are so very different from someone else in terms of their competence, in terms of their agroclimatic conditions, in terms of risk-taking ability and labor that is available, and all of that. So therefore, all of this really adds to the vulnerability of risks that are otherwise inherent in agriculture. So if you are dispersed in these 600,000 villages, obviously the need for real-time and relevant information gets underscored. And that is something which has not happened traditionally, and therefore there is one level of disablement. If farmers are heterogeneous, the knowledge that needs to be delivered for managing crop has to be very personalized, and that has not happened sufficiently in the past. That's another thing which disabled. Now, if the farmer's income has to go up, it has to meet certain consumer preferences at the other end of the value chain. If you look at food as one subsector within agricultural output, today's consumers are increasingly looking for quality, more variety, food safety, and convenience while buying and using. A whole host of factors which are very different in the recent past as opposed to the situation that was obtaining some decades ago. when there were shortages and obviously whatever was produced reached market and got consumed. So this puts the needs in terms of traceability of crops, and since that traceability has not happened enough when the farmers are small and dispersed and when the value chains are broken, that has disabled. Visibility of the identity of the crop along the whole supply chain is another requirement to deal with these consumer needs, and that has not happened sufficiently, which is also disabled. Another important factor, obviously, when we come to agriculture is the aspect of natural resources. The way resources are utilized in a manner that you're probably adding something back rather than consuming what is not renewable and spoiling the soil, using up water and some of those kind of things. And the amount of awareness as well as the ability to deal with those issues, all of which typically have some short-term benefit but some long-term negative implication, meant that the attention to this aspect has also not been sufficient, and therefore that has also disabled. So along the whole chain, these are the factors which disabled and created those kind of paradoxes that we talked about. So we move on to, therefore, what can E and ICT really do to enable and change some of these disabling factors. There are a few things which are fairly simple. There are a few things which get more complicated as solutions. So starting at the simplest, moving on to potentially what's more complicated is the arrangement that I have for each one of these solutions. I've listed several of them at various stages in the eChopal initiative itself, and many other people have done also something similar elsewhere. And some of them are mainstreamed and are happening over 10 years now. And some of them are on the drawing board and likely to happen over the next year to 2 years at this point of time. The first enablement that is required is that real choices have to be created for the farmer when he is selling the produce or buying various inputs. By supporting with information, by supporting with knowledge to be able to make use of that information, to be able to make choices, and move away from traditionally the only two alternatives that the farmer had. Either sell to a village trader who obviously wanted his pound of flesh for all the convenience that he was delivering in the village, or go to a market yard to sell the produce as another option, but which literally meant like swimming through the deep sea and get a very low share of a consumer rupee that is spent. So delivering real alternatives in terms of price information from any source of what is prevailing in different market yards, different terminal markets, as well as a supporting system in terms of how do you evaluate quality to be able to bid a price and provide that real choice is something which is critical. So there is a role that information technology has to play there in terms of a basic price discovery that has to happen, but some of these other conditions have to occur to be able to make this difference. The second is reaching some of the forecast and early warning systems, whether it is simple weather forecast in terms of rains or other temperatures or any pest incidents and some of those kind of larger epidemics. So networks, whether it is new ICT enabled or whether it was a traditional radio or whichever form, that brings some of these kind of things on a real-time basis from the back end is the second thing to be able to get the early warning system on time, and this needs to happen at low cost, and information technology really happens and makes it to happen at low cost. One of the other things that is required is that is done very well obviously by information technology is the ability to duplicate content at low cost. If we had reached a newspaper in the past or a magazine in the past, the cost of duplication of all of that was heavy, and obviously it had its own time in terms of delivery. But because of the ability of low cost duplication, a lot of content, especially to do with crop management practices, as also with respect to historical prices, so that when the price is at a level now, the farmer to make a choice whether it's a good price to sell or wait, what was it historically. So all of this content to be duplicated at low cost is something which is another ICT enablement which can make a difference. One of the biggest beneficial impact of information technology in each of our similar other projects has been, how do you connect a knowledge and expertise sitting at some back end at some central point to multiple front ends, because expertise, it is very difficult to reach to so many different locations, and we say 600,000 villages one has to reach in India. And to be able to connect with an expert at the back end, and depending on the level of problem and the nature of expertise that is required, obviously different solutions are possible, starting with calling up on a phone or sending an email or taking a picture and sending it back, or several such possibilities in terms of how it is dealt with. But connecting multiple front ends with an expertise at the back end has been another strong ability of information technology that can enable. And of course, if transactions were to occur, instead of relying on a physical market yard or a local trader, if the farmers have to access markets at far distances, electronic trading platforms for spot markets, as also for futures markets, although it is still quite difficult for farmer to engage and access the futures markets because of various reforms which still have to occur. But extending the reach beyond a local market yard or local trader is something that, from an e-commerce perspective, something which can enable very well. So all of these are things that we have done in the past, is happening at a level of scale and delivered all the outcomes that are possible in different crops that different projects are operating in. Two areas are what are on drawing board, which I'm hopeful that can further substantially improve the impact that ICT can make on agriculture. One is a personalized crop management advisory, adding mobile phones to the network, in addition to all the solutions that exist. There is a space for physical demonstration plots, there is a space for local dialogue, there is a space for call center, there is a space for telephone communication, photography and sending back. But in addition to all of that, supplementing this is a mobile phone where a two-way data flow is something which is going to make a difference. While you can deliver information to farmers on somewhat customized form by saying that which village and which crop someone is growing, but more often than not, a farmer is looking for more personalized advice. If my sowing date may be of the same variety in the same village is 15 days after someone else's sowing date for that crop because the rain has occurred at two ends and I only had a limited irrigation facility, the nature of advice has to be entirely different. And if that date of sowing is inputted into a mobile phone and from several such farmers goes back into analytics and a solution going back, whether it is automatic or expert supported, is a great opportunity to personalize such advice. Or it is at the stage of growth of an individual crop, depending on whatever the conditions of the soil, or it is the different levels of investment that the farmer is willing to make, the different levels of risk he is willing to assume. There is a different solution that needs to be delivered to individual farmers. So one of the reasons a broad, even when customized solution is not fully adopted by individual farmers is that the level of personalization is not enough, and that is something which is an integral part of what we are now calling as eChopal 3.0, which I'll close in about 2 minutes time. Initiative, and I'm happy to also share that Nokia is an important partner in taking this forward as someone with an expertise from the mobile phone perspective. And another important area which is on the drawing board is that the aspect of precision farming. The small Indian farmer has always been very precise in whatever he was doing. But enabling that kind of a precision farming with support from sensors, whether it is contact sensors or remote sensors, and with some amount of connecting back to the network with some sampling devices, whether it is soil or crop itself is an important area that can improve the precision, especially in the area of sustainability and natural resources management is something which is very critical. So there is also something which is on the drawing board. So there are a series of things that one can do and essentially reverse whatever disablement that one has talked about. And since the time is up, I'll just talk about the last section as really just the headlines rather than detailing any one of them. To enable all of this, besides the basic e-gadgets, a major other infrastructure that is really required, which is still a concern at this point of time in rural areas, is the power. So that is critical. The second is the importance of role of training. Dr. Mani already talked about training from an external perspective, also training for the community, the facilitators, and all of this happens when the value proposition is communicated very well, and that's an area. The big opportunity is evolving agricultural services as a new industrial opportunity. We have seen service in every other area, but agriculture services has traditionally been a free services market. How can one create interesting revenue models so that farmer doesn't need to pay, and yet it is a business model that is possible. And lastly, all of this is possible when partnerships, whether it is the public and the private and the people and the not-for-profit sector as appropriate, come together to combine the different strengths and deliver. And to date, whatever that we have been able to do is because of these kind of partnerships, and I believe that's one of the very important way of doing these things. Thank you very much.